The man at my funeral. My name is Eleanor May Whitaker, though I suppose it's strange to introduce myself when you're hearing this from a woman who's already been buried. If you're listening, it means someone cared enough to dig through my journals. Good. Some stories are too heavy to take to the grave, and mine? Well, mine could split a family in two. The day they laid me in that oak coffin, Willow Springs Baptist Church was packed shoulder to shoulder. The smell of lilies, mixed with old wood and cheap perfume, made the air thick enough to choke on. My daughter, Martha, sat in the front pew, her hands folded tight in her lap like a little girl afraid of being scolded. She didn't cry. Not once. Halfway through the service, the doors creaked open. Every head turned. A man I'd never seen before, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that had seen better days, walked in with eyes red as fresh blood. He didn't look at the pastor. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked straight at my coffin and started to weep. Real, shaking, gut-deep sobs. People whispered, shifting in their seats. Martha's face went pale. The man stepped forward, laid his trembling hand on the wood, and whispered, "Goodbye, my love. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Gasps rippled through the church. And just like that, the secret I'd hidden for 34 years was standing in the middle of the aisle, daring anyone to ask who he was. If you want to understand that man at my funeral, you have to understand me before life carved me into the woman they buried. Back in 1968, I was 29, married to Harold Whitaker, and living in a 2-bedroom farmhouse with peeling wallpaper and a mortgage that felt like a mountain. Harold was a good provider, sure, worked sun up to sundown at the lumber mill, but his heart was quiet. Too quiet. We'd been more like polite roommates than lovers since our daughter Martha was born. Most nights, after Martha was asleep, I'd sit on the porch swing, listening to the crickets and staring at the road, wondering if life was supposed to feel this lonely even when you weren't alone. Then one evening, during the church's summer revival, I met Daniel Hayes. He wasn't from Willow Springs. Said he was just passing through, helping his uncle fix up a property by the lake. He had this easy smile, the kind that made you feel like you'd been friends for years. And when he spoke, he looked right at you, not through you like Harold did. It started innocent. A few words at the church potluck. A laugh over my too sweet lemonade. But the way he remembered the smallest things I said, the way he made me feel seen. I'd never admit it out loud, but I started picking my dresses more carefully on the nights I knew he might be there. One late August evening, we stayed behind after choir practice, stacking chairs in the fellowship hall. He brushed my hand by accident, or maybe not by accident, and I swear, it was like my whole body woke up from a long sleep. That's when I knew. If I didn't stay careful, my life was about to change in ways I couldn't undo. Strange, the way one decision can live in your bones for the rest of your life. That September was hotter than usual. Harold was working double shifts, trying to save for a used pickup, and I was alone in the house most evenings. The air felt thick, restless, like it was waiting for something to happen. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by with a basket of peaches. Said his uncle had more than they could eat and thought I might like some for cobbler. I knew I should have just thanked him at the door. But instead, I invited him in. We talked in the kitchen, the fan whirring lazily overhead. He asked about my dreams, not the kind you have at night, but the kind you tuck away because life tells you they're too big. I told him about how I'd once wanted to be a teacher, to see the world outside Willow Springs. He listened like my words mattered. Before I knew it, we were standing too close. His hand brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. The next moment, his lips were on mine. It wasn't like the movies. There was no music, no perfect lighting. Just two people who were starving for something they couldn't name. When I pulled back, my breath was shaking. "This can't happen again," I whispered. But deep down, I knew it would. Over the weeks that followed, we met in the quiet spaces life forgot, in the shed behind the church, on walks by the lake after sunset. He told me he'd be leaving town by winter, but that didn't stop us. If anything, it made each moment burn brighter. I told myself it was harmless, that no one was getting hurt. But every time I looked at Harold, or tucked Martha into bed, guilt clawed at me. The last time I saw Daniel, the leaves were turning gold. He held me like he was memorizing the shape of me, then pressed something small and heavy into my hand. "Keep it," he said. "You'll know when it matters." I never told anyone what that was. Not Harold. Not Martha. And I never guessed how valuable it would one day become. It's been 50 years since Daniel placed that small, heavy thing in my hand. 50 years since his breath was warm against my ear when he whispered, "You'll know when it matters." I never showed it to Harold. Not once. I kept it wrapped in an old handkerchief, hidden at the back of my sewing basket, under spools of faded thread and buttons I swore I'd use someday. Back then, I didn't even understand what it was worth. The years passed in that slow, unremarkable way life often does. Harold and I grew older together. We fought over bills, laughed over burnt biscuits, and sat on the porch watching summer storms roll in. Our daughter, Martha, grew into her own, first pigtails and scraped knees, then high school dances and heartbreaks. I became the good church lady, the one who baked pies for funerals and crocheted blankets for newborns. If anyone had told the town that Eleanor Whittaker had once kissed a man behind the church shed, they'd have laughed and said, "Not our Eleanor." Daniel left, like he said he would. No letters, no phone calls, not even a rumor. Sometimes I wondered if I'd imagined him, if the peaches, the walks, the soft, stolen words were nothing more than a dream from a younger version of myself. But the handkerchief in my sewing basket reminded me he had been real. And that I was keeping something from everyone I loved. When Harold died in his sleep at 68, the house felt too quiet. I kept moving. Busy hands keep the grief at bay. I tended the garden, sang in the choir, and baked more pies than anyone needed. Martha came by less as the years went on, busy with her own family, her own life. I told myself that was how things were supposed to be. Children grow up. Mothers grow old. The space between them grows wider. But one rainy afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled out the sewing basket, pushed aside the spools of thread, and unwrapped the handkerchief for the first time in decades. Inside was a gold locket, old, but not tarnished, and a folded slip of paper so thin it felt like it might turn to dust. The paper held an address. Just an address. No name. No note. The locket, when I opened it, had no pictures. Just a tiny, almost invisible seam along the side. I pressed it, and the seam gave way, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was. I stopped breathing. Tucked inside were 2 tiny diamonds, not the kind you find on a ring at the pawn shop, but stones that looked like they belonged in a museum. They caught the light even in my dim kitchen, scattering it across the walls like a handful of stars. I snapped the locket shut and sat there for a long time, my tea growing cold in front of me. What was I supposed to do with them? Sell them? Hide them again? Tell Martha? I could already imagine her face, not the wide-eyed little girl who used to hold my hand, but the grown woman who saw everything in terms of numbers and dollars. She'd want to know where they came from. She'd demand answers I wasn't ready to give. So, I wrapped the locket back up and tucked it away again. Years kept moving, even as my world grew smaller. The arthritis got worse. My knees didn't like the stairs anymore. I stopped driving after I clipped a mailbox one icy morning. The church ladies brought me groceries when I couldn't make it to town. Then, about a year ago, I got the news that Daniel had died. It came from an old friend who'd moved away and still kept in touch with folks from other towns. I hadn't heard his name in so long that it felt strange in my ears. I didn't cry. I didn't even know if I was allowed to. He wasn't mine to mourn. But that night, I took out the locket again. There was something about knowing he was gone, something that made the weight of the secret heavier. Like I was the last keeper of a story no one else even knew existed. And then came the letter. It was postmarked from a lawyer's office in another state. The handwriting on the envelope wasn't familiar, but the moment I opened it, my heart started pounding. Mrs. Whittaker, it began, my name is Peter Lang, and I represent the estate of Daniel Carr. As one of Mr. Carr's designated contacts, you are requested to attend a reading of his will. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. A will. I read it 3 times, then set it down on the kitchen table, staring at it like it might vanish if I looked away. I didn't call right away. I let it sit for 2 weeks, tucked under the salt shaker, as though burying it in the ordinary might make it less dangerous. Finally, one sleepless night, I dialed the number. The man on the other end sounded surprised to hear my voice. "Mrs. Whittaker," he said, "I wasn't sure if you'd respond. The will specifies that you're to receive something, though the details, well, I think you should come in person." "I'm too old to be running all over the country," I told him. There was a pause. Then, "Mrs. Whittaker, I believe you'll find it worth your while. Mr. Carr left behind assets of considerable value, and some of them are directly connected to you." My chest tightened. Assets. Value. Words that sounded like trouble in the wrong hands. I thanked him, said I'd think about it, and hung up. For the next week, I couldn't stop picturing that locket. The diamonds. The address on that slip of paper. I wondered if the will would explain it all, why he'd given them to me, why he'd kept my name in his papers all these years. But I also knew that the truth had sharp edges. If I stepped into whatever this was, I might not be able to step back out. And if Martha found out? Well, that was the thought that kept me up at night, because if she learned the truth about Daniel, about me, about what I'd done, it wouldn't just change how she saw me. It might destroy what little relationship we still had. And yet, a part of me, the part that still remembered the girl who dreamed of seeing the world, wanted to go. Maybe it was greed. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was the simple fact that I didn't want to take this secret to my grave. Either way, I picked up the phone the next morning and booked a bus ticket. I didn't know it then, but that single decision would unravel everything I thought I'd kept hidden. Because the truth about Daniel Carr was far bigger than I ever imagined. The will. The bus ride was long and bumpy, the kind of trip that leaves your bones aching. I sat by the window, watching towns blur past, diners with peeling paint, fields gone wild, old men sitting outside hardware stores like they'd been rooted there since spring. The law office was in a building too clean for my liking. Polished floors, air that smelled faintly of lemon and money. The receptionist smiled in that polite, distant way young people do when they don't really see you. "Mrs. Whittaker?" she asked. "Mr. Lang will be right with you." When Peter Lang stepped out, he wasn't what I expected. No grey hair, no suit older than he was. He was young, maybe late 30s, but his handshake was steady, his voice warm. "This way, please." We sat in a room with a long, gleaming table. At one end, a folder sat waiting. He opened it, and I saw my name on the first page. "Mr. Carr left a number of bequests," Lang began. "But there was one special item. He wanted it to go directly to you." He slid a small envelope across the table. I hesitated. "What's in it?" "That's for you to decide," he said gently. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was another folded slip of paper, this one newer, cleaner than the one I'd kept in my sewing basket all those years. It wasn't just an address this time. It was a deed. My name was printed on it, right under the words, "Owner of Record." A property. Lang explained that it was a small cabin in Montana. Mr. Carr purchased it in 1989. He never sold it, never rented it, paid the taxes every year. And he kept it, waiting. "For me?" I asked. He nodded. He left no explanation, but there's one more thing. From the folder, he drew a faded photograph. It was Daniel, younger than the last time I saw him, but still older than the boy with the peaches. He stood in front of the cabin, smiling, his arm draped around someone who had been torn out of the picture. Only a sliver of their shoulder remained. I couldn't breathe. "Mrs. Whittaker," Lang said softly, "there's also a safe deposit box key. It's in Montana. He wrote in his will that the box should be opened only by you." The air in the room felt thick. I should have said no. I should have left the deed and the key right there on that polished table. But something deep inside, curiosity, stubbornness, maybe even love, wouldn't let me. Back home, I tried to keep it from Martha. She called a few days later. "What's this I hear about you going out of town?" Small towns have no secrets. "I just needed some air," I told her. She didn't buy it. "Air doesn't come with lawyers' offices and property deeds, Mom." I changed the subject, but her tone stuck with me. Martha had her father's suspicion, the kind that sniffed out lies like a bloodhound. And she was about to dig. 2 weeks later, a letter came from Montana. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words inside were like a punch to the gut. Mrs. Whitaker. My name is Samuel Carr. I believe we are connected in ways you may not know. I'd like to meet, at the cabin. Please bring the locket. The locket. No one but me, and Daniel, knew about it. I folded the letter, slid it into my apron pocket, and stood at the kitchen sink staring out at the dying autumn leaves. That was when I realized this wasn't just about me and Daniel anymore. Someone else knew the secret. And if I didn't go to Montana, they might just come to me. When I finally told Martha I'd be gone again, she pressed me harder. What's going on, Mom? Who's Samuel Carr? I lied. An old friend. She didn't answer for a long moment. Then, quietly, I hope you know what you're doing. I didn't. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever waited for me in Montana, it was going to change everything. The cabin in the pines. The flight to Montana was rough. The kind of rough that rattles the trays and makes strangers look at each other with the same silent prayer. Please, not today. By the time I landed in Missoula, the sun was low and the air smelled different, cleaner, sharper, like every lungful was a reminder that I was far from home. The rental car's GPS led me through winding mountain roads, past rivers that flashed silver under the fading light. The farther I drove, the less civilization I saw. Just trees. Pines so tall they looked like they could scrape the clouds. When the cabin appeared, it wasn't grand or flashy. Just a small wooden house tucked into the trees, shutters faded, chimney leaning a little to one side. It looked exactly like the kind of place a man might hide something, or someone. A figure stood on the porch. He was tall, maybe late 40s, with dark hair streaked with grey. His eyes. God help me, his eyes were Daniel's. Mrs. Whitaker, he called, stepping down the stairs. Yes, I said, my voice catching. Samuel. He nodded. Thank you for coming. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. I know you have questions, he said finally. And I do too. But, maybe we should sit. Inside, the cabin was simple but well kept. The air carried a faint scent of cedar and something older, a smell that made me think of summers long past. On the coffee table sat a box of photographs. Samuel pushed it toward me. These were my father's, he said. Daniel Carr. I reached out, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The first photo was of Daniel at the river, shirt sleeves rolled up, smiling at someone just outside the frame. The next was him holding a baby. Samuel. My breath caught. That's you. Yes, Samuel said quietly. And my mother was your sister, Ruth. I stared at him. The words didn't make sense. She never told you, he asked. No, I whispered. She and my father were together before she met her husband. But there was a scandal. She left town. My father wanted to marry her, but Ruth wouldn't let him. She said it was better if I grew up with her husband's name. But she always kept in touch with my father. Letters. Pictures. And when she passed. He paused, watching my face. He told me about you. I gripped the locket at my neck. But why me? Why now? Samuel hesitated. Because before my father died, he said you were the only person who knew the whole truth. And that the truth might matter more now than ever. I asked about the safe deposit box. He nodded toward the small desk in the corner. The key you have. It's for a box in town. My father left instructions for both of us to open it together. We drove the next morning. The bank was old, the kind with brass fixtures and the smell of polished wood. The box was heavier than I expected. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were stacks of letters, all from Ruth to Daniel, spanning decades. And at the very bottom, a legal document. It was a claim. For mineral rights. Daniel had bought the land the cabin sat on because beneath it ran a vein of rare ore, something worth millions. The deed, the rights, everything was now in my name. I sat there in the bank's small private room, the truth washing over me like cold water. This wasn't just about love or family secrets. It was about something people would kill for. On the drive back, Samuel kept glancing at me. "You have to know," he said finally. "There are people who'd do anything to get that land. My father, he kept it quiet because he didn't trust anyone. Not even me, at first." I looked out at the mountains, my mind racing. Martha didn't even know this existed. And if she did, would she see it as a blessing? Or just another reason to resent me? When we reached the cabin, I told Samuel I needed a moment alone. I stepped onto the porch, feeling the wood creak under my weight. Somewhere in the trees, a bird called, sharp and distant. That's when I saw it. A car, parked just far enough down the dirt road to be hidden, but close enough that I could see the glint of sunlight on the windshield. Someone was watching us. I turned back inside, my heart pounding. "Samuel," I said, "do you lock the doors at night?" "Always," he said, his expression tightening. "Why?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to tell him what I already knew in my bones. We weren't alone out here. And whoever was watching, they weren't here for a friendly visit. The knock at midnight. I didn't sleep that night. Every groan of the wood, every snap of a branch outside felt like a warning. Samuel tried to act calm, but I saw him checking the window more than once. By midnight, the forest was silent. Not peaceful silent, wrong silent. The kind that makes you feel like you've stepped into someone else's hunting ground. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud. Just a single, deliberate rap on the door. Samuel froze halfway across the room. "Did you?" "Sure," I hissed. The second knock was slower, heavier. "Stay here," Samuel whispered, reaching for the heavy flashlight on the counter. I grabbed his arm. "Don't open it." But he did. The porch was empty. No figure, no sound but the whisper of wind through the pines. On the wooden step, a folded piece of paper. Samuel picked it up, frowning as he read. Then he handed it to me. It said, "That land doesn't belong to you." No signature. Just those words, written in blocky, deliberate letters. By morning, the tension between us had thickened. Samuel wanted to call the sheriff. I wasn't so sure. I'd lived long enough to know that trouble sometimes wore a badge. Instead, I suggested we leave the cabin for a few days, make it look abandoned. Samuel didn't like it, but he agreed. Before we left, I went to the bedroom and opened the drawer where I'd hidden the locket. It was gone. I didn't tell Samuel right away. If he'd taken it, confronting him would do no good. And if he hadn't, it meant the stranger had been inside while we slept. We drove into town, checked into a small roadside motel that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and fried food. Samuel said he was going to speak to an old friend of his father's about the deed. I said I needed some air. Instead, I called Martha. "Martha, it's Mom." Was a pause. "Where are you?" I'm in Montana." Her voice sharpened. "Montana? Since when?" I could have lied, but something in me had shifted. "Martha, I think I've stumbled into something dangerous." I told her about the cabin, the will, the watcher. I didn't tell her about the mineral rights, not yet. She was quiet for a long time, then said, "Mom, I'm coming there." "No," I said quickly. "It's too risky." "Risky for you, maybe. But you're my mother. And if someone's threatening you, I'm not staying put." The line went dead before I could stop her. That evening, Samuel came back pale-faced. "My father's friend says people have been trying to buy that land for years. Cash offers. Double market value. He turned them all down." "Do you know who?" I asked. "Not exactly. But one name kept coming up, Whitaker Holdings." The blood drained from my face. Martha's husband's company. I didn't tell Samuel what that meant. Not yet. But that night, as I lay in the stiff motel bed, I knew two things. First, whoever was watching us had deep pockets. Second, my own daughter might be tangled in this more than I'd ever imagined. And if I was right, the betrayal waiting for me wasn't in the shadows outside. It was in my own family. By the third morning in the motel, my nerves were thin as paper. I hadn't told Samuel everything, and I could feel his patience fraying. The locket was still missing, the note from the stranger still in my pocket. I was sipping a bitter motel coffee when there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was. Martha. She stood there in her city coat, hair perfect as ever, makeup untouched by the long flight. Behind her, a man in a pressed suit unloaded her luggage from a sleek black car. "Mom," she said, eyes scanning me as if I were the one who'd done something wrong. "You look tired." I forced a smile. "Travel will do that." Inside, she glanced around the cramped motel room like it was a crime scene. "So, where's this cabin you told me about?" Samuel stepped forward from the corner. "You must be Martha." She turned, studied him, then smiled the way she does when she's deciding whether someone's worth her time. "And you are?" "Samuel Carr," he said. "Your cousin. Though you didn't know about me." Her smile faltered. "Clearly." We drove to the cabin that afternoon. The woods seemed darker than before, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Martha kept asking questions, not about Samuel, not about Ruth, but about the deed. "How big is the property? Is there a lot of interest in it? Did you already sign anything?" I kept my answers short. But every time she asked, I could feel the gap widening between the little girl who used to curl up in my lap and the woman sitting in my passenger seat. When we reached the cabin, something was wrong. The front door was ajar. Samuel motioned for us to stay back, but Martha brushed past him. Inside, drawers were pulled open, papers scattered, furniture tipped over. In the middle of the mess, on the floor, was my locket. I picked it up, heart pounding. The clasp was broken. Inside, the tiny photograph of Daniel was gone. Samuel looked furious. They were looking for something specific. Martha turned to me. "Mom, this is exactly why you need to sign that property over. You're not safe here. I can handle the sale discreetly." Her words hit me like a cold wind. "You knew about the land?" She didn't flinch. "Of course I did. Tom," she stopped, catching herself, "heard rumors from some contacts. We didn't know you were involved until now." I stared at her, searching for the daughter I knew. But all I saw was the sharp calculation in her eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. Samuel sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. "You see it now, don't you?" he said quietly. "I don't want to," I whispered. "People kill for less than what's under this land. If she's here, it's not just to protect you." I looked at him, the weight of years pressing down on me. "She's my daughter." "And I'm your nephew," he said. "But blood doesn't mean loyalty." Just before dawn, I heard movement outside. I peeked through the curtain. The black car that had brought Martha was gone. And so was Martha. No note. No call. Just gone. When I woke, the cabin felt hollow without Martha's presence. The extra coat hook was empty. Her perfume, that sharp, expensive scent, had already faded from the air. Samuel was outside, chopping wood with a force that looked more like anger than necessity. "She left before sunrise," he said when I stepped out. "Didn't wake you. Didn't wake me. But she didn't go far." We drove into town, a sleepy place with one diner, one hardware store, and a post office that doubled as a gossip hub. It didn't take long before Samuel spotted the black car parked behind the diner. Through the back window, I saw her, my Martha, leaning across the booth toward a man in a tan jacket. His hands were on the table, palms flat, voice low but intense. She nodded, sliding a manila envelope toward him. "Stay here," Samuel said. But I didn't. I walked in, the bell over the diner door jangling, the smell of coffee and bacon hitting me hard. Martha froze mid-sentence when she saw me. The man in the tan jacket turned just enough for me to see the scar that cut across his jaw. "Mom," she said, forcing a smile. "You're up early. Who's your friend?" I asked. No one spoke for a moment. Then the man stood, tipped his head. "Just talking business." "Business about my land?" I asked, my voice shaking. Martha glanced at Samuel, then back at me. "Mom, it's complicated. There are offers you don't understand. This isn't just a patch of dirt, it's valuable. And the people interested aren't patient. Her words dropped like stones in my chest. So you'd rather deal with them than with me? It's not like that, she said, reaching for my hand. I'm trying to protect you. Samuel stepped forward. No, you're trying to cash out before anyone else gets a piece. The man in the tan jacket took a step between us. You folks should finish this conversation somewhere private. We left the diner in tense silence. Back in the car, Martha's voice was low, almost pleading. Mom, if you don't sell now, they'll take it. These people don't ask twice. And you're just, what? The messenger? I asked. Her eyes softened for a moment, and I saw the little girl again, the one who used to pick wildflowers for me in the spring. I'm your daughter, she whispered. And I'm trying to make sure you're alive to see next year. That night, I sat awake in the dark, listening to the woods breathe. Every shadow felt heavier, every creak in the old cabin sharper. Samuel came in from his patrol around the property. She's still talking to him, he said quietly. I saw them by the fence. I closed my eyes. I didn't know if Martha was saving me or selling me out. The rain had been falling since before dawn, that kind of slow Kentucky rain that doesn't thunder, doesn't shout, it just seeps into everything until you can't tell where your tears end and the sky begins. I was at the kitchen window with my coffee, watching it blur the tree line, when I saw her. Martha. My daughter. Hood pulled tight, boots sinking into the mud, a black bag over her shoulder like a thief in the night. My heart tightened in that way it only does for your child, half fear, half fury. I pulled on my coat, the one Samuel always said made me look like I was ready for war, and followed her through the wet grass. She didn't hear me until I was close enough to see the raindrops clinging to her lashes. Martha, I called. She turned, startled, but didn't move. What's in the bag? I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands were not. She didn't answer at first. Then she knelt in the mud, unzipped it, and pulled out a stack of old maps, ledgers, and photographs. My maps. My records. The ones I'd kept hidden under the bed in the locked cedar chest since before she was born. How did you? I asked Samuel for the key, she said softly. I needed to show you something before it's too late. Too late. The words felt heavy, like a clock striking its final hour. She pointed to the maps. This isn't just family land, Mama. This is millions of dollars. Coal rights. Enough to set up my kids, their kids, and you, for the rest of your life. I felt my chest tighten. And you went behind my back to sell it. Her voice broke. I didn't want to. But the people who already own the land around us, they don't ask twice. I was trying to make a deal before they took it by force. Her eyes glistened. I was trying to protect you, even if it meant you'd hate me for it. A branch cracked behind us, and Samuel appeared, hat dripping with rain. She's telling the truth, he said. They've been watching this place. Last week, they offered me money to push you into selling. My stomach turned. And you didn't tell me. His eyes lowered. I didn't want you to be afraid. I looked at them both, the man who had stood beside me for years, and the daughter I had once carried through fevered nights, singing to her until my voice was gone. And now here we were, standing in the rain like strangers. Martha, I whispered, I've spent my whole life guarding this land because it was the only thing left of your grandfather's dream. I gave up more than I can name to keep it safe. And in the end, it's torn us apart. She stepped forward, tears mixing with the rain. Mama, I don't care about the coal. I care about you. But you've been carrying this alone for too long. It's time to let it go, and let us in. Something inside me cracked then, not like breaking glass, but like ice thawing after a long, bitter winter. I reached into the bag, pulled out one of the maps, and stared at it through blurred eyes. All those years of sacrifice, all the birthdays I missed working, all the quiet meals alone at this very kitchen table. I tore the map in half. Martha gasped. Mom. We'll sell, I said. But not to the wolves. We'll find someone fair, and we'll split it evenly. But from now on, we do this together. No more secrets. She nodded, her whole body trembling. I can live with that. Samuel didn't speak, he just took the bag from her and slung it over his shoulder, like he was taking some of the weight off me too. We walked back to the cabin slowly, boots sinking into the wet earth. My coat clung to me, heavy with rain, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Because this, right here, was the real inheritance. Not land. Not money. It was the fragile, hard-won chance to stand beside my daughter again, not as the woman who kept her out, but as the mother who finally let her in. And if that was all I left behind when my time came, it would be enough. Please like and share, drop your comment.